Most conversations about the next great Asian economy go the same way. China's manufacturing dominance, India's demographic dividend, Vietnam's cheap labor story, Indonesia's sheer size. These are the names that show up in investment decks and geopolitical briefings. Malaysia rarely makes the list. That is a mistake. And the people who figure that out early are going to have a significant informational edge over those still staring at the same four names. Malaysia has quietly built something that most of its neighbors have not: an economy that is diversified enough to weather commodity shocks, strategically positioned enough to benefit from almost any outcome in the US-China rivalry, and institutionally mature enough to attract the kind of high-value investment that permanently raises a country's economic ceiling. It is not the largest economy in Southeast Asia, it is not the fastest growing, but it may be the most strategically positioned. And in an era defined by supply chain fragmentation, great power competition, and shifting trade routes, strategic position might matter more than size. To understand where Malaysia is going, you have to understand how it got here, because the path was not accidental. Before independence, Malaysia was British Malaya, an agrarian commodity supplier for the empire, at one point the world's largest exporter of tin, rubber, and palm oil. After independence, through the turbulence of decolonization and a rapidly shifting global order, Malaysia made a decision in the 1970s that would define the next 50 years. Rather than doubling down on commodities, it looked outward, specifically at the four Asian tiger economies: Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan. Countries that Malaysia had once competed with or had some sovereignty over, but which had since surged ahead. The government's conclusion was simple: study what they did and do it too. What followed was a deliberate pivot toward export-driven manufacturing. Free trade zones were established in cities like Penang to attract foreign investment and industrial know-how. Japan became the key partner. Mitsubishi, Honda, and Toyota set up automotive plants. Sony, Panasonic, and Hitachi developed the electronics sector. Semiconductor firms began using Malaysia as a production and packaging hub. Foreign capital and expertise flowed in, and Malaysia used it, not just to grow, but to build the infrastructure, workforce, and institutional foundations that would outlast any single partnership. The result is a country that today accounts for 13% of global semiconductor testing and packaging, exports more integrated circuits than palm oil, and has infrastructure, roads, ports, internet connectivity, that ranks among the best in Asia and outperforms many wealthier Western nations on citizen satisfaction metrics. That trajectory does not happen by accident. It happens through decades of consistent policy, reinvestment, and a willingness to keep updating the model. Now, here is the part of Malaysia's story that rarely gets the attention it deserves: its geography. Because Malaysia's physical location on the map is not just convenient, it is genuinely extraordinary. The country sits at the crossroads of the Strait of Malacca, the narrow channel connecting the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. Roughly a quarter of all global maritime trade passes through this waterway. It is the primary route for energy imports into China, Japan, and South Korea, and one of the most critical choke points in the global trading system. Any serious disruption to that strait does not just affect Malaysia, it affects the entire Pacific economy. That geography creates leverage. It means Malaysia cannot simply be pushed around by larger regional powers, because access to the strait matters too much to too many players. It also means Malaysia is structurally positioned to benefit from virtually any configuration of global trade, whether supply chains run through China or away from it, whether the dominant trade relationship is Trans-Pacific or Indo-Pacific. The goods still move through Malaysian waters. There is also a time zone dimension that gets almost no coverage. Malaysia shares business hours with China and Singapore while starting the day in the middle of active trading hours in parts of Europe and the US. For companies managing global operations, that overlap is genuinely valuable. It reduces the communication dead zones that plague operations split across Asia and the West. It is one of the quieter reasons Malaysia has become an attractive hub for regional headquarters, digital businesses, and remote-friendly professionals seeking low cost of living alongside full modern infrastructure. Before we go further, If this kind of analysis on emerging economies and strategic investment positioning is what you are here for, subscribe now. We break down the global forces shaping business and capital every week. But Malaysia's most important strategic asset right now may be something more specific. Its position in the semiconductor supply chain at exactly the moment that supply chain has become the most contested industrial territory on the planet. The US-China technology rivalry has turned semiconductor manufacturing into a geopolitical flashpoint. Taiwan holds the commanding position in advanced chip fabrication, which is why it sits at the center of so much geopolitical tension. But the semiconductor industry is not just about fabrication. It is a long chain of specialized processes including design, testing, packaging, and assembly. And Malaysia is deeply embedded in that chain in ways that cannot be easily or quickly replicated elsewhere. Intel, Infineon, and a growing list of advanced technology firms have poured billions into Malaysian operations in recent years, not despite the geopolitical volatility, but partly because of it. Companies diversifying away from single-country concentration in their supply chains are looking for stable, capable alternatives. Malaysia offers rule of law credible enough to protect industrial investment, a technical workforce being actively expanded through government-funded engineering programs, and a track record of not weaponizing its position in the supply chain for short-term political gain. Malaysia's new industrial master plan, NIO-M 2030, is built explicitly around capitalizing on this moment. The focus is on high-value, high-complexity manufacturing and workforce development aligned to industry needs. The country is not trying to become the next low-cost assembler. It is trying to move up the value chain permanently, and the semiconductor opportunity is the clearest path to doing that. None of this means Malaysia's rise is guaranteed. There are real structural challenges, and being honest about them is part of understanding the opportunity clearly. The most persistent risk is what economists call the middle-income trap, the point at which a developing economy has grown wealthy enough that its low-cost labor advantage disappears, but has not yet built the domestic innovation capacity to compete on quality and complexity. Malaysia has been navigating this transition for over a decade, and the outcome is genuinely uncertain. Much of its manufacturing success was built on absorbing technology and know-how from foreign partners rather than generating it internally. As those partners mature and innovate more slowly, the risk of being left with aging industrial infrastructure and no clear next step becomes real. There is also the governance dimension. Malaysia's economic story has not been clean. The 1MDB scandal, in which billions of dollars from a state development fund were allegedly siphoned off through shell companies and spent on everything from real estate to Hollywood films, remains one of the most audacious acts of financial fraud in modern history. It damaged institutional credibility and underscored a corruption problem that sits in uncomfortable tension with Malaysia's aspirations to be taken seriously as a high-trust investment destination. Progress has been made, anti-corruption frameworks have been strengthened, and the judiciary has demonstrated a degree of independence that was not always present. But trust in institutions is built slowly and damaged quickly, and Malaysia still has ground to recover. Then there is the regional competition question. Indonesia is larger and growing faster in terms of direct investment. Vietnam is where Malaysia was 20 years ago, hungry, cheap, and attracting the kind of labor-intensive manufacturing that Malaysia is trying to graduate out of. Singapore operates at the other end of the spectrum, smaller, vastly more expensive, but with a trust premium that commands a different class of investment entirely. The honest answer is that Malaysia does not need to beat any of these countries. The Southeast Asian economy is not zero-sum. Vietnam is one of Malaysia's largest trade partners. Singapore is its largest source of foreign direct investment. The region's growth is largely complementary rather than competitive, and Malaysia's task is simply to keep upgrading fast enough that it occupies a distinct and valuable position in that ecosystem, rather than being squeezed from both ends. Here is the bottom line for anyone thinking about this from a business or investment perspective. Malaysia is not a high-risk frontier market bet. It is not a speculative play on demographic growth or commodity prices. It is something more unusual and arguably more interesting. A mid-sized economy with mature infrastructure, a credible institutional framework, a critical position in the global semiconductor supply chain, and a government that has shown a consistent ability to set long-term industrial targets and actually execute on them, at least most of the time. In an era when the premium on supply chain resilience, geopolitical neutrality, and reliable rule of law has never been higher, those qualities are increasingly scarce. Malaysia has them. And the countries and companies that recognize that before it becomes consensus will have a significant advantage over those still looking at the same short list of obvious names. Thanks for watching. If this changed how you are thinking about Southeast Asia and where the real strategic opportunities are developing, subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.